So I had the opportunity to see the movie Strays the other day, and I actually really enjoyed it. It was cute, just to see the dogs on screen, and they were um, done. They got the dogs to move really well in terms of the direction for them, and I guess they used some CGI on their mouths, but otherwise the dog's direction was really good. But what stood out most for me about the movie was actually that it had a really well written story and a really well toned, movie. Like it was only an hour and a half, and it never felt like it lingered too long, and you wanted a little bit more, but you always want to leave them wanting something more. But like I said, just the script was tight, and it allowed for character growth. There was a romance subplot. Like it was really impressive for how well something could be written when you kind of take all progressive politics and all sort of ideological message out. Because when you just have a stand-in for humanity, i.e. the dogs, you don't there's really no room for some sort of discourse other than a comedy, through line. And to its point, it was a rated R movie, so that it definitely ran with that at a few points, mostly to its benefit. I will say the end, I think it was to its detriment, but it still was funny. Like it was funny the whole way through. It just tried a little bit too hard to be raunchy at times. So I will say you should probably go see it. So I would, while it's in theaters, it was very fun in theaters. Everybody was laughing in the audience, and maybe I regretted my choice to sit so close in the very front row towards by the end of it. I'll explain that as we go, but I still had a good time going there. I think it's on streaming now, so it's definitely worth watching there. So if I were to be the persnickety type, I might suggest that you go watch it and then come back and we can discuss all about it, because I think it is worth your time. It's funny. It's got a good emotional through line. Will Ferrell and Jamie Foxx are both really funny, especially Will Ferrell. His character is just so upbeat. I mean, it's Will Ferrell. He's one of those people that just lights up every time you see or hear him. So he's definitely worth it for that. But whether you've paused this video and you've come back and you're ready to discuss it, or you just want me to break it down for you, let's get into it, I guess. So, Strays is the story of Reggie, who is a border terrier, but he's really just like a scruffy like mutt. They never even mention that. And he's living with his owner, Will Forte, who who they start out, showing that Will Forte is kind of like a crafty life, and it starts out with him and his girlfriend, who's portrayed by what's her name, Mona Lisa from Parks and Rec. She's funny for all that she's in there, and she's really gung ho about this dog, so she gets it, and they bring it home, and neither of them really looking after it too much, and they just kind of let it roam free. And pretty soon they're having dinner, and like the narration it's always the narration. This movie does is a good example of where narration can work, because it makes sense that there's so much narration, and it gives you a good sense for what's going on in Reggie's life and his perspective. you know so it's really one of the few movies that I could think of that just has an effective, like, first person narrator throughout the whole thing that's not like reflective looking back. So it's good for that outset. So it's like one of the big first bit is that Reggie's like, I like these people, because he loves everybody, even if they're treating him like shit. Which is not too bad. He's like, I have to kind of find my own toys, which is fine. I have this scrunchy thing, and he comes out with this thong, and the couple are having dinner. Will Forte and his girlfriend's like, that's not mine. So he's like, oh, I can explain. And of course, she breaks up with him and she leaves. And as she's going to get the dog because it's kind of her dog. And Will Forte is like, no, it's my dog. I love this dog so much. And she's like, you never love it. And she's like, yeah, but I do. And I don't want you to have it. And he literally says that. So that makes it even better. So she leaves, and then you've got like a 5 or 10 minute beat with showing what his life is like there. And because I guess he wasn't really working to begin with, and he lost his girlfriend, so it literally shows him like it's all from all from the dog's perspective, Reggie's perspective. So it's like, I like him even if he doesn't really want to have me around, because he's always like shooing him away. He's like, but I still love playing with him, even if he literally says, like, even if Doug loves playing with his toy better, and he literally, he even says, even if Doug loves playing with his penis better, and it shows like, you know, Doug jerking off, on his. So And I mean, and he's like, I try and play with it too, and he jumps off, and and Doug shoos him away. He's like, but Will Ferrell's like, but he just shoos me away. So I thought it was kind of odd that they mentioned that at first, they went there, but once again, it's a rated R movie, and it all kind of does culminate. So, um, but anyway, so it kind of establishes that I would describe his Will Forte's relationship with this dog as neglectful. Like he's not necessarily not feeding it or anything, but he is neglectful to just basically neglectful. That's all. Not harmfully neglectful, and I think that's a good point to make. But just basic negligence for just like kind of non interference because it's not like he's not feeding it or anything like that. He just doesn't really want to have anything to do with it, and that kind of all culminates when Doug gets an eviction notice and he has to move back to his home with his mother and Will Ferrell, Reggie just wants to play with him, and he's yapping and he's wanting to play, and then eventually he knocks over, his bong, and that causes Will Forte to like really lose it. It's like, I've had it with you, and he kind of shoos him away, and then he's like, you know what, take this ball and go fetch, and he drives him out to like somewhere a little bit further away, and he's like, go fetch, and he goes away, he goes back home, and it's this part that Reggie starts to say, Doug loves to play this game called, what is it, Fetch and Fuck. It's like Fetch and Fuck. Yeah. Because it's like, he throws the ball and I go get it, and then I come all the way home, wherever he left me at, and as soon as I drop it at his feet, he says, fuck. Like, I came home again. Like that's the intonation there. Like I can't believe he made it home again because he's clearly trying to get rid of him. So that's probably the most harmful thing that he did. Dropping him off, literally trying to make a stray out of this dog that's domesticated. But Reggie keeps on coming back home even after he goes relatively far, and this culminates in Doug taking Reggie in a really long car ride, and you can see him looking out the window at a few things. He sees they go by a fair, and they also go by like a large hill. And then something kind of said that the third thing kind of slipped by. It was a billboard apparently, but I kept on wondering what the third thing was, and it comes into play, which I'll explain in a bit. Hope you're all liking the explanation, by the way, or the breakdown here. So anyway, so he drives him, and he later establishes that it was like 3 hours away. So he drives him, and he drops him off 3 hours away. It's like the usual. They're in like an alley. He's like, hey, hey Reggie, fetch. And he throws the ball, and the dog kind of bounders down the alley, and then he goes home. And it's this part that they kind of show kind of how smart that Reggie is as a dog, because the ball rolls under a fence and Reggie can't get to it and he can't go around the fence, but he looks and he can like climb on some pallets and then like jump through a window, then go through, go out that building on the other side and get the ball on the other side of the fence. So there's like several steps to that. And not only, is the dog, shown as intelligent and capable in doing that, but they did a good job of really getting the dog to go through this whole thing and have it look very natural. Like I said, there's some later CGI mouth movements that are obviously fake, but otherwise, I mean, as far as I can tell, this is all quite natural. They just must have trained him and led him really well. I should probably have looked up how they did it all, but it's probably interesting to see that, and it was really, so many things are just kind of CGI messes these days, so it was nice to see something that was just based in practical shots, almost the whole way through. So anyway, like I said, not only do you see his intelligence there going around, but then he gets the ball and he can't go back the way he came, so he kind of has to keep on going. And it's in this part that you kind of get a sense that he maybe isn't so happy with this whole thing. I mean, he's excited, but he's like, he's wandering for a little bit and it gets late, and he's like, as much as I like this, sometimes it would be nice just to be home and hang out with Doug. And he kind of crashes on a bit of cardboard for the night. And let's see, the next day he's woken up by a dump truck, and he starts to wander home again, and he has his ball, and then he's like talking to some other dogs, some big dogs, and they shake him down basically and get the ball from him, and they're like threatening to mess him up. And then you see the shadow, and you hear Jamie Foxx like, hey, I'm gonna fuck you guys up, get the fuck out of here, and he's threatening these much larger dogs. And then out steps, Jamie Foxx. He's a little, what is he, like a Boston Terrier. His name is Bug. So he steps out, and I guess they kind of run him off. They just kind of scare him off. I think maybe they got scared, before. But either way, those two kind of walk off Bug and Reggie kind of walk off, and Bug tells him he's been astray for a while, and he's like, he takes him under his wing, even though, one of the first rules is like, you never trust anybody or you never help anybody, but that's what he starts to do. So, he kind of shows him, there's just like this whole speech, and actually that's kind of refrained, touched on later, just the way he does it. I forget the wording, but it's like, I've got 3 rules that I live by out here, and it is basically like, no, don't trust anybody. And it's like, it's he kind of pitches it all as like a freedom thing. It's like, I don't want an owner because I'm freer out here without one, because nobody to disappoint you. And like they walk by a dog park, and there's like, see them like coming out for 15 minutes a day and feeling free because of that. Like we have total freedom all day long, and we're not bound by by somebody else's whims and all that. So I, personally, from my life, I kind of enjoyed that aspect of it. Just of pitching that, like, this isn't, being astray isn't a bad thing. It's a good thing, because you're more free that way. So I appreciated that note. But as they go by the dog park, they go in there. They follow some other dogs in, and there they meet a couple other dogs that Bug is friends with. They meet an Australian Shepherd named Maggie, and then a therapy dog, a Great Dane, named Hunter. And both these voice actors, I forget who they were, but they were both pretty funny. They were both voiced by, all these people were comedians. So Isla Fisher, I guess, was the dog. Was the female dog, the Australian Maggie. Randall Park, yeah, he was the Great Danes. So they're both, kind of true to their acting abilities there in the normal kind of portrayal. So I really enjoyed both of them. Excuse me. To speak to their character, Maggie was like this really kind of, she was, she had long hair, and she kind of wanted to, I guess, have a good owner or something like that. She was jealous of the other dogs that had a good owner. Then so she didn't really have a place, was kind of the big thing. And then Hunter's arc was that he was in this cone, and it kind of is established early on that he doesn't need to be in this cone like anymore. Like I think it was entirely like something that he put on, or like just kind of kept on. So, and he's like, he's a big dog, he's a Great Dane, but he's very timid to stand up to these other dogs that are kind of, there's just one dog that's harassing him, and just like bullying him. And he's like, you're not, you're just putting him down, like kids would on a playground. In this dog park, and the Great Dane, Hunter doesn't know how to stand up for himself. So like these people have some nice arcs that are established from the outset. And once again, like you go into this stuff, and there's so many things these days that establish arcs, but they never really pay it off. And so the first half, you're like, well, this is nice. We'll see what they do with it. But in terms of what they did, the next scene is kind of like they like Reggie. They're like, hey, you should come out with us tonight. So in terms of that, they have this pretty good, funny montage where I forget what they were doing. Just cutting it up. The biggest thing is that they go to this one dog's house, and who's a big like pug or something like that. He's like a squat little pug, and he or an English bulldog, I think, actually. And the bulldog like can't come out of his house because he's like, oh, there's a magical fence. I can't come out. It's invisible. Like, oh, it's crazy, man. There's no fence there. It's like, no, I'm telling you. Like, come on. And they have the scene where you see him running, and he tries to run out of this invisible fence, and of course it shocks him. And he's like, oh. And then later on in the montage, it cuts back to as Reggie in that same scene, same place, they're all there. And he's like, I think I can make it. I think I can go over there. I'm like, no, Reggie, it'll zap you. It's crazy. And Reggie, they have this like really slowed down shot of Reggie bounding and then jumping, over this invisible magic fence. And he comes on the other side and makes it. And he has this scene where he's with the other dog that's trapped over there. And, it made for like a good culmination to the end of like a night on the town montage. Oh, the other big part of that too is like, oh, we're gonna get some scraps, and they go to this like pizza bar where everybody's like really loaded, and they're like dropping scraps, and eventually they drop this whole pizza, and they all run in and grab a slice. That was pretty funny too. So like overall, like even from the start, this movie does a good job of like, kind of like Toy Story, of like how do dogs perceive the world if they were, humanized, if they were conscious, any of that, whatever you want to view it as, like what is important to them, how do they view the world, what do they fear, what do they respect, what do they do with their time, and all that. So it was interesting. That whole montage was really fun. So, and as they're doing that bonding and stuff, um, they all start to talk about their situations, and they ask Reggie why he's there and stuff, and he's like, he tells them about the stuff that Doug would do, and he's really happy go lucky, but they're like, Reggie, it kind of sounds like he was a bad owner. Like, it sounds like he wasn't a good guy. It sounds like he was trying to get rid of you. And he's like, no. And he kind of steps away, and he kind of dawns on him, like, oh yeah, I guess it was. And then, so this is kind of where it changed a little bit for me. I think it's fine to establish this, but anyway, they kind of convince him that, like, yeah, he wasn't a good guy, and so he decides to get revenge on Doug by going back and ripping off the only thing that Doug really cared about, his penis, of course. He literally says, like, I'm going to go back and rip off his penis. And it's Will Ferrell saying that. And he's like, kind of this culminant his realization. So it's like, it's a big 180. Like, you're allowed to have 180s that that a character thinks they want to do. That's fine. But let's just keep on going. I'll break it down. So, but he's 3 hours away and he doesn't know the way back. His only clues knows that there's a hamsterless ball, like there's like a hamster wheel, or like he says something like that, and a giant cone and a devil floating in the sky. And I kept on thinking, like, what the hell is a devil floating in the sky? What is he talking about with that? But they start to go back, and the hamsterless ball was turns out to be the amusement park. It was like just a little a little little carnival, and that was a pretty good scene because they get there, and that was the first check mark, so they're on the right way. All four of them go, um, and they get there, and they're going in to get some food, and I think one of them eventually gets some. I think it was kind of funny how they got it, but I can't even remember what it was necessarily. But the big thing that was really kind of funny there, and this is once again why it's funny to see Dog's perspective on the world, because they're about ready to eat this food that they've gotten because they're all starving, and then, like, all of a sudden, uh, like, this attack starts happening on them, and it's just a fireworks show. But it's not even that loud, but it's like a thunderous, like, deafening thing for them, and they drop all their food and they run, and they have to get back on the road again. And it was just kind of funny just to see. Yeah, dog, any dog owner is gonna love that scene. That's kind of the whole part for the course the whole way through the movie. There's also, like, in that bit, they come across a dog there who is like with another owner, and I think it was Josh Gad, but maybe it was somebody else. But I swear that's who it was. And they're like trying to talk to him, and Jamie Foxx is like, oh, he's one of those narration dogs. And he's just like, Josh Gad is like narrating to himself, like, and then my owner did find a beautiful girl, and he loved her, but he is a serial killer, and he took her back to his place, and so it was funny that just his like his character in there was funny, and it was just kind of one of those, like, oh, it's rated R, so, like, we're gonna put this 2-second joke about a serial killer in here. And I think Josh Gad's dog came up, like, later, to something, but it wasn't really plot related. But so that was a funny little bit there. Well, like I said, the highlight of that bit was just seeing them all run from that, and they were just running in terror. They really slowed down, like, got some slow mo shots of them running, so that was pretty funny. Um, Also, one of the thing that happened earlier is at the dog park. I'd have to mention this because it's like Chekhov's gun. If you see a gun in the first act, it's going to go off in the third. And this movie was, like I said, it was a tight script and it was really true to form and all that. So something that happened earlier in the beginning was, like, they're trying to, like, when they're all talking at the dog park, they're trying to, like, buff Hunter up. Like, Hunter, you're a big dog. You got to have that big dick dog energy. They say something like that, and they're like, "Oh, come on," and they're like, "Yeah, it's really like," and like Will Ferrell was like, "Yeah, I'm looking right at it. It's big. It's huge." And they show this shot of, like, and I'm right in the front row, mind you. Like, they show this shot of, like, of his big flaccid dog dick just kind of, like, slowly waggling there, in a slow mo shot. And once again, it's a Chekhov's gun situation. I didn't think it was. I just thought they were dick and fart jokes, but I gotta give them credit. I'm telling you guys this for a reason. Like, it was funny, and it gets to laugh, and you think that's it. But and that's fine for that. But anyway. So where we were in the story, though, is they got the first thing, the hamsterless ball. So they got that, and the next thing they had to find was a giant cone, which was a hill. It was like this big hill, kind of mountainous looking hill that they passed by. So as they're kind of walking towards that, I don't know if it was before or after that, but I guess it was after that, yeah. So the first thing they're looking, I guess they find the giant hill. I guess that was the next thing. And then as they're kind of walking on, they all get really hungry, and they're in the woods, and they're like, oh, there are these mushrooms. Let's eat them. And I knew as soon as they started munching on them, like as soon as anybody starts munching on a mushroom in a movie, that's not like a cooked, like the thing they cooked specifically. It's they're gonna be magic mushrooms, of course. And it was pretty funny. They're the tripping scene was done different than most. It wasn't like all this colorful stuff. It was more like what are they kind of perceiving and all that. And the big thing was that was once again like what did dogs like want, and they come across this hole in this tree with all these stuffed animals, these stuffies in it, and they play with them all and they rip them all off and they pass out, and they wake up and there's like blood and fur everywhere, like, oh my god, what do we do? And they ripped up some rabbits and stuff. Which then none other species like ever really are sentient in this. It's not like the Toy Story thing where it's like all these inanimate things are talking, all the different toys are talking. It was like they give the side eyes to some cats at one point, and they show some squirrels at one point as well. But nobody's ever like there's not a bunch of other species that are ever talking or anything like that. So I don't know if these bunnies that they killed were sentient or not, and I don't know why they're necessarily so bummed about it. Because I mean, if they're dogs, wouldn't they kind of kill other? Like my cat kills quite a few bunnies or squirrel, rats and other stuff, mice and things. So. Like I don't know. It seems like wouldn't that be par for the course for a dog? But whatever. It made for a good scene, both before and the realization of it. And that was the other part where Josh Gad's dog came up. If that was him anyway, he was an hallucination to one of the dogs or something. So it was an amusing scene, and it all kind of culminated to where they're freaking out about it, and then all of a sudden these other dogs come up that are looking for like a missing girl or something like that. They're like some police dogs, and they say hi to Hunter because Hunter was a police dog before, but now he works at a nursing home now. And they're like, "Oh, we're buddies." Like, "Hey, let's get out of here." And they walk out of the forest together. And then at that point, they nab, all four of these quote unquote stray dogs. Reggie and or not Dog, Bug and the other two. So they take them. They don't kidnap them. They take them, to animal control, and they take them to the the pound or whatever, the shelter. And so this is obviously the low moment of the movie, which all movies should have one where it's about halfway where the characters are just their lowest moment. It's before the resolution. But so they're trying to figure out how to get out of here, and this is the I think this is the main Chekhov's gun moment for the dog tick setup. Yeah, because they're like trying to get out, and they're like the keys are like they see the keys on the other side of the gate, other side of this their cell. Like, oh, if only we had a straight long rod to like pick them up and get them over there. And like, if only we had a big straight long rod. And they're looking at Hunter and it's like, Hunter, your penis. It's like, oh my god. And he kind of stands up against the cell, and you kind of start to see the shadow of his penis get hard. And this is where the romance plot kind of came. Kind of culminated nicely, or at least kind of started, because that forced, because there was some flirting earlier, that forced the female dog, what was her name, Maggie, to kind of get up there and talk to Hunter about how much she liked him and stuff. So it was nice to see that romance subplot come to the foreground, or be required, a hurdle to overcome for the plot to resolve. So I thought that was a nice touch. But then like they're trying and and they have the shot of this, like, because they didn't show it, and they had the shot of the whole thing straight on, and you see him with the dog penis that's like fully erect, but it's like still a foot away from the keys, like it's not getting there. So it's just like, it cuts away from that. They're all they'll get back down. But I gotta give them credit. I didn't think they'd show an erect, massive dog penis like that. And they certainly did. And I was, by force of viewing habit in the theaters in the front row, and one of the few times that I averted my eyes from the screen, just out of, I don't know, it was funny. It was just, I wasn't expecting to be that close for that much of a recurring concept throughout a movie like that. But either way, this the jail cell, the whole jail being in captivity thing resolves with them like, well, how are we going to get out of here? Like, when does the guard ever come? And they're like, well, the guard comes every now and then to clean the shit out. And Reggie's like, all right, you've all got to shit. You've all got to poop your brains out. You know, he says it, and he's like this really motivating way. He's like, I need all of you to just crap your as much as you can crap. And then they're all just filling the place up. But then it's like, it's kind of weird because the next scene they show is like the guard coming in, and then you see how the dogs are like, they're each like in front of the crap they took, like right in front of it. And it didn't necessarily look like they are all crapping like that on the outset. They were just kind of crapping everywhere. So, but whatever. I don't really care. You know, obviously it was like the smallest dog like took the biggest shit sort of thing. And it was a lot of dog shit to see on screen. It's a rated R movie, so I mean, I guess you know what you're getting in for. Once again, an interesting thing to be very close to the screen on. But it was a good resolution, you know, because obviously they get in. The guard comes in and he's like, "What's going on?" But he's got to clean it out. And then at this point, they'll kind of rush him, and he trips over onto the shit, and he just kind of gets covered in it. And you see the shot of him as the dogs are running out of the pound. You know, he's like chasing after him, and he's just covered in shit, and everybody's looking at him like, what the fuck is going on back there? And he's just like, it's like dripping off of him at parts. And you know, they really ham it up. You know, he like walks back and he kind of like taps the desk, like gives like the desk like a fist tap like on top of it, and just gets some of it on there. So they play it up. I thought it was pretty good. You know, so that's why I appreciate this movie. Just the attention to details the whole way through. It told a good story and all those little things. But to finish it out here, they get out of there and they're like, all right, what's the next thing? And I think they either like come across it or they're talking about what to do. And oh yeah, in the pound, Reggie finds a tennis ball and he kind of takes it out with him. And the tennis ball is a symbol of him wanting to go back and be Doug's like pet again. And they're starting to walk, you know, at one point, and they're talking, and Reggie's like, "Oh, where's my ball at?" And he goes to get his ball, and then you know the other dog, Bug, challenges him like, "Hey, why do you have that ball? You're not a tennis ball kind of guy." And Reggie's like, "Yes, I am." He's like, "No, you're not. Drop the ball." He's like, "No, drop the ball." And he's like, "No." And he's like, "I know you're not going to want to drop it because you want to go back and you want to be his pet still. After all this, despite everything you've done, despite all of us going all the way out here for you, you want to go back and be a pet." And Reggie's like, "No, that's not what I want." You know, and this ultimately causes them to split because you know in any movie like this, which is like I guess I'd define it as like a road trip kind of movie, like an adventure kind of movie. It's not a road trip, but you know, like the classic homeward bound journey sort of thing. You know, everybody has to split or go their own ways. That's at the low point there too. So I guess maybe this was a low point, not being stuck in jail. I guess that was just a hurdle. I don't know. Either way, uh, I think just before this too, they had seen the last sign, so they I guess they knew the way home, and and Reggie was starting to go there. It was the last thing was the billboard. It was the devil floating in the sky, which is a billboard with a picture of a mailman. So I thought that was a nice little payoff because they keep on talking about like the devil floating in the sky. Oh, we're like that's the last thing. It's like we got to find the devil floating in the sky. That's the last direction home, and it was just a big billboard with a picture of a waving mailman on it. So Reggie bolts off and heads towards home, which nobody else knows the direction towards, and you know. The other three start walking off, but then Bug gets kind of annoyed. He's like, "You know what? Screw you guys!" And he like wanders off into the forest. I thought it was kind of odd, but and the other two dogs just start wandering home. But then shortly after, Bug comes across a girl who's crying, and He's like, "Oh, you're the girl that got lost." He's like, "But I don't care. Like, I don't want an owner. I don't care about anybody." He's like, "You can sit there and cry," and he just kind of rebukes her. But then after a few minutes, he's like, "Oh hell!" and he goes up and kind of says hi and comforts her and stuff because there's like a lost Girl Scout that was like why the other police dogs were out earlier. So then Bug starts to yell for the other dogs, and the other two dogs come over. Hunter and whatever Maggie. And I thought like the resolution to the Lost Girl Scout could have been a little bit better because they all just kind of howled together, and then the other searching dogs came over. So apparently everybody was just in yelling distance of each other, but they kind of like upped this that emotional connection later. So I felt like they should have had Bug like have to stay with her or like help her get out from something, like maybe she's like stuck in a creek that's like a rapid, and he helps her with like a stick, or I don't know, just something, like I'm trying to think, like he's a very small dog, and even though she was like an 8-year-old, like maybe 10, that's like it would be objectively hard for him to physically help her. Maybe like she's like dangling on a cliff and he grabs a rope and kind of pulls it back and helps pull her up or something. I don't know. Like you're even just like even if it was just as simple as like he stays with her and like the other two dogs run off and like find them or something, and you just have a little bit more of a scene where they just that's even if that's as simply as he can help her because he's so small, just the size disparity. You would have something where she is helped by him to a degree, quote unquote help. Once again, I think if it was something much bigger, like where she's in a creek, that'd be better. Because I mean, the big payoff there is that they they find the stray, they find the girl, and then they're like, we gotta go back and help Reggie. Like we don't abandon our friends, just like this girl. But like they're like, where are we gonna find him? We don't know. And when Reggie and Bug were fighting earlier, Bug ripped Reggie's little bandana off because Reggie's got this cute little bandana on the whole time. It's really too adorable. Rips it off, and it's established earlier that Maggie is like a really good. She's got a good nose, And even though when Bug ripped the bandana off, he pissed on it. Like Maggie, they go back and Maggie like gets a smell out of it. Even though the police dog there couldn't get Reggie's smell off this bandana, Maggie gets the smell, and they go off and they find Reggie at Doug's house, and Reggie just goes in, and he thinks that maybe he's too late and Doug had moved away, but he's not actually still there, and uh, and Reggie is kind of like he wants to kind of be there for a little bit, but then at a certain point he's like, what, I'm kind of done here. I just kind of want to go away. But then it's at this point that Will Forte, Doug is like, what, I've really had it. This is gonna end now. And I don't necessarily know if he intended something malicious or if he just wanted to like get him far away. He basically like shuts the door on Reggie, so it's just those two in his like kind of empty apartment. And he's like, this is gonna something something. You're just kind of threatening and menacing, and he's backing him towards a corner. And it's at this moment that the door bursts down, and by the Great Dane Hunter, he bursts the door down, and they rush in, and all three of them are there, like, hey, we're gonna help you. And Will Forte has a bat, I believe, and he's kind of swatting it around a little bit. And one of them gets behind him. There's like a little bit more of a scuffle for a minute. One of them gets behind him, and he falls back down. It's remember still established they're gonna rip his penis off, and he falls back down. And he kind of hits his head in a bottle, so he's kind of like knocked out a little bit. Then the Great Dane Hunter puts his legs on his back feet on his shoulders to kind of hold him down a little bit. Which maybe that's believable, like if you're dazed from your head. And then each of the other two dogs, get one of his legs each, and they kind of spread them. Which, like, even if you're dazed, like one of the dogs, she's like I said, she was what was she again? She was an Australian Shepherd, so she wasn't too much smaller than Hunter. So she could conceivably like grab one of Will Forte's legs and spread it and kind of hold it in position. The other dog, Reggie, Bug, which was once again a Boston Terrier, like you could kick your leg and just like kind of shoo him off, and then be out of that situation because they've got him spread eagle on the ground, and the three dogs are holding him in position there, um, so that Will Ferrell can come up and like, all right, ready, you can bite his dick off because he's such a bad owner. And it's this moment that I really hoped that the movie would. I knew they were going to because it's a rated R movie, and the whole thing with Hollywood these days is you got to subvert expectations. And for a movie that did surprisingly little subverting expectations in the way of like changing up the plot to make nonsensical things happen, and just like, oh, you think like they're gonna freak out about the fireworks at the fair, but they didn't. They really didn't mind them at all. Like in terms of, or like having this like whole dog penis thing set up and not doing anything with it. Like in terms of eschewing expectations, just having like silly jokes, like you think maybe they're gonna. That's kind of par for the course. But they do actually. Uh, so like I said, I'd hoped that they would like, because like the emotional thing is that he wouldn't like just think about it, because like, let me just break it down first, then we can talk about it. So what happens is they've got him there, and they kind of slow mo it, and Reggie goes in, and he grabs on to Will Forte's penis and balls and everything, and kind of really starts moving his head back, like jerking his head around like dogs do when they're playing with the stuffy, and they've got it like pinned down with their paws. And he's like really, they've got him like held. He's like really for like a solid minute. You see him just like jerking and swinging his head, and it ends with Hunter like taking his shit on Will Forte and like his mouth and stuff, and just kind of covered him in that. And they go out of there. They're like, yeah, we're all happy. And then the story ends with them back in the city that Will Forte dropped them in. 3 hour away town. Yes, they all walked back there, and it starts with like Reggie talking about like, now I'm a stray, and he's like giving the same speech that Bug gave him at the start. He's like, I'm a stray now, and he's like showing these new dogs, like, oh, it's okay to be a stray. This is where you can get some food, and like make sure you don't trust anybody, and but I'm your friend. And I forget the speech, but it was kind of it had some nice patter to it. It was a good speech. Like the voice act, the writing was all done really well. I'll say, like everything was written really effectively. But and then he's like, the best thing is like the freedom. You can go and you can see your friends, and he sees them at the dog park. And he's like, and the best thing is you might always find a friend who's got like a nice like backyard for you to run around in. And it shows him going to uh, Bug's house because Bug is living with that Girl Scout, that found him and stuff. And they're like running around the backyard there. And then it ends with like the Girl Scout's brother being like, "Hey, mom and dad, that cute scruffy dog is here again." Like the cute scruffy dog. So and then it ends with like Reggie being like, "But I wouldn't mind having an owner too." So it ends with him having a new owner, and presumably those two living happily ever after in the house. And then also in terms of the resolution, it shows the other two dogs at the dog park. It shows Maggie being a police dog now, which I thought was really a really good arc to her, because it didn't start out with her necessarily wanting a lot, just kind of wanting like an owner and stuff, and it gave her more than that. It gave her purpose. So I thought Maggie had really one of the best arcs in the story, and she was a compelling character. And yeah, I guess my only criticism with her and female representation is that I don't think the movie necessarily passed the Bechdel test, but I don't think there were. Well, there was earlier because there was a scene where there were two dogs that were owned by two like kind of Paris Hilton-esque people who were like standing there talking about fashion and stuff, and they were like two little chihuahuas, and it was kind of funny. So it did pass the Bechdel test. Bechdel. But then it showed. Let's see with the dog penises. It didn't show it, but it showed like it showed Hunter without his cone off. It showed Hunter without his cone on, and he was kind of standing up to that bully dog earlier. But the bully dog still got like the last word in because he was just like a tiny little like bully of a dog. So it was kind of funny still. And then it showed them like hooking up behind like a obstacle. So they were just, thankfully it knows. It kind of showed things from the waist up there, so it knows what to show. At least it knew what to show in that respect. Um, so, like I said, in terms of, I think how it could have been better is like, I didn't. As I'm describing it now, it's like, and as I think about it, it's like it ends in a very happy, pleasant manner, but it does so after kind of a very jarring thing, and it's like nobody. I heard this once that only the victimized want to make others victims. Like only the abused abuse others. Like a good way to think about that too is like Japanese during World War II were routinely beaten, like as soldiers, like during training and stuff, and even like onwards, and that forced them to like fight till they were like had double-digit men on like some of their islands. Till they're from tens of thousands, or however many, or till they were just in like the hundreds, or like double digits of people left. And like the whole reason why the atomic bombs were necessary is because they would have kept on fighting. For like projected casualties were 500,000. I don't know on which side or both or all together, but that's a lot of people. Fighting island by island. So like and that's because of just the fighting spirit, the Bushido, the Bushido, the fighting spirit that was instilled in them because they were victimized as a part of this their whole process of becoming soldiers. They were routinely beaten, they were routinely victimized, right, and that caused them to have a mentality of never giving up and also wanting to inflict that about others. Like I'm sure we all know about Japanese POW camps, and of course, Japanese atrocities during in China and all that. Now I bring this up because, like, the dogs, all four of them, by whatever, but Reggie especially is the one who does it. But all four of them are actively doing this, going off on this cross country trip to go rip this guy's penis off. Is like it's not really warranted because he didn't like beat the dog, Reggie. Yeah, he tried to get rid of him and make him a stray dog. It's the worst thing that he did, and that is pretty bad. But it's not like Reggie was a helpless animal, and it's not like Reggie didn't keep on coming back too. Like he literally kept on coming back. I know that is a training. It is a part of training, but I mean, like maybe watch this for yourself and see what you think. Because like, I guess it's just some guy's fake dick that didn't even really get ripped off, and it was a funny bit. And it all ended too. Like he's at the doctor. He's got this big cast on his waist, and the doctor's like, "Well, you've got an infection because of the dog shit that's in your mouth." And looking at my chart here, looking at my chart. Oh yeah, we couldn't reattach the penis, and yeah, take care. And he's like, it ends with like, oh, "Fuck," It's like Will Forte just screaming. So it's like it's kind of like with the Equalizer the other day. It's a comeuppance movie. It's got that element of a comeuppance thing where it's like this guy is such a jerk, he's gonna get his comeuppance. And it's like, was he that much of a jerk? Because there's even this part in this movie where like they're like, was he a jerk, or were you just like always in his face and like couldn't give him any space? And didn't you knock his bong over? And there's even a part, like I said, where it makes Reggie kind of question himself if he was a perfect dog. So, and it's weird because it's like on one hand, if they all kind of realized that from the outset, they wouldn't have a reason to go back to this town and go back there and even take this cross country trek together. And it's like, well, maybe they can go somewhere else. Why would they have a need to go anywhere else? And it was all fun to see him go back the same way, or to see him go anywhere really. But to see him go back where they knew they'd been before, that giant devil floating in the sky, that made for a nice through line the whole way through. But and the whole reason why they all kind of go back to help him is like, we're gonna punish this guy for all bad dog owners together. So it's like very much like he's a representation of all bad dog owners. And you can have a movie that's kind of like that where this guy represents all bad dog owners, but then I might suggest that you make him be a bad dog owner. Like if you're not gonna have him abuse Reggie, like have him abuse another dog, or be like an animal control shelter guy and abuse dogs there, or something malicious that he like does or like has done to deserve all this, because at the end he doesn't really deserve everything that happens. I mean, based on your views of how badly he treats Reggie, you might feel different, but I just want, once again, from somebody who sat way too close on some of this neglect, just basic, like just kind of parental neglect, not a humanitarian needs neglect, and the forcible stray, becoming there. Those are the only things that he did, and to have, because it's like there's you can't hurt people unless they've earned the punishment that comes to them. There's anybody who's seen Community, this TV show, and seen the Halloween episode where they all tell a scary story knows that like, are these people ever going to die, Abed? Once they've earned it, So it's like he really should have earned this kind of tragic end that became his character there, or at the very least, they should have just had it where they could have like they reattached it or something, or wasn't that bad. But really, what they should have done, because the worst part about all this is that not just that Will Forte may or may not have deserved this, but it paints Will Ferrell in a position where he's kind of like a tough, like, I wouldn't want to fuck with him now because he's kind of crazy. Like, anybody who's capable of inflicting that much pain on somebody else that's not really warranted, like, they're kind of crazy. They kind of have a screw loose because, like, why, if they're gonna just do that, they're gonna flip the shit and like do something so treacherous just because they were slighted a little bit. Like, what will they do if you don't feed them quick enough one day, or if you're not their friend as they want you to be, or whatever? So like, I really hurt his character, and that's a shame because he's such a happy-go-lucky character. And it's like the ending is kind of the most important thing for any story because it's what you're left with when you go out of the theaters. That's like what you're thinking. It either kind of taints it or makes it better. Like in the last Indiana Jones movie, the ending on there kind of actually redeemed the first three-quarters of it or two-thirds of it or whatever. So like the ending, like the Flash, like the ending there where like Barry has to put the can back and he has to be the one to not be able to save his mom, like, again, like, even though this whole thing sort of him saving it, like, it made that movie more enjoyable than less enjoyable just because of having a nice, like, emotional through line at the end that makes sense and paints all the characters involved in a better light. And this movie didn't do that. It could have done that in one of two ways. It could have done that, as like I said, by making Will Forte a worse character, which is once again hard to show on screen because nobody wants to see animal abuse on screen, and that's what you'd have to do there. That's what you'd have to do to have him deserve that ending, because it's just like a funny little haha gag, and like I said, movies are fascinating. The other way is that, and this is what they should have done. This is what they should have done. They get there because it was all shot really well. Like, I will say, like, the way that they tripped him over and his head hit the bottle, and the way that you're kind of like, it's like you're in a point of view shot and you see the Great Dane Hunter, like, straddle him, and you see his kind of asshole and everything, and like, you kind of know what's coming, and you see his like hands grab the carpet. So like, it was all this, and the way they spread his legs, the two dogs, like, it was all shot really well. It was all an effective bit of film that I wouldn't want to take away. But what they should have done is they get him there, and Will Ferrell is like sitting there looking at him when he sees him like kind of cowering or whimpering or something. He's like, you know what? Just leave him like this. Like he doesn't deserve it. Like, he doesn't, like, I don't even know what you'd say, but like, maybe like the funny thing is the shit. Like, you could have him like, like, maybe that would be enough to like have him walk away if he sees him covered in shit. But I think that's what you have to end it on. So it's like, if you had something where it's like, you know what, you know, because he. So here's how I would end it. You would have them all in that situation where you've got him down on the ground, they're straddling him, and he goes up and he's looking at all of them. And he's like, you know what? As much as I hate him, like, I can't say, as much as I don't like him, I can't say that I hate him because he brought us all together, and I can't imagine life without all of you guys now, without all of you guys anymore. It's like, you guys are my best friend, like, and I can't, it's like, you guys are my best friend, and that's it. And so he's not all bad for having done that. Or you could say, you guys are my best friends, let's just go. And then you'd be like, Hunter would be like, not yet. And then you take the shit and they go. I think that'd be a better way to, maybe, like, so if they're, I might add something else where something falls on Will Forte, like a can of paint or something kind of silly to like make him look silly, some like feathers or something, oil and feathers. I don't know, something like, maybe he smashes his bong again, something to like make him look sillier and stupider in that situation, and just have him like walk away, because like, that would show. I'm sure there's a better way you could like make, just have him do that 180 there, because it's not necessarily 180. He kind of wants to not do that earlier. He wants to be his owner. All right, this is how you do it then. He's like, you know what? I really don't want to hurt anybody. I just want an owner that loves me. And if he won't do it, maybe we'll find somebody else that will. I mean, it's nice to end the movie on him being a stray, and like, kind of showing other strays the ways. But the point is, like, you could just have him have like still get to that situation and then just have him be the better dog and walk away, and they all go off and be a happy family, and then you know that he's a good dog. And you still have like a scene of Will Forte at the hospital, like, oh, yeah, that dog shit caused an infection, and I don't know. I mean, it was funny to see him curse not having a penis and all that. It's a rated R movie. It's not my job to sit here and write this, but I just feel like it just left some lasting implications for Will Ferrell's character in terms of how good or not good he is, and Will Forte didn't necessarily deserve it, and it's a very hard thing to show on camera. I noticeably squirmed and turned around in my seat a little bit during that part. I had a hard time looking at that screen because it was a solid minute of Reggie just ripping this guy's dick off, through his pants and everything, and really giving it all. Uh, so it's frustrating that at the ending, kind of taints a movie like that. Kind of like I said with the Flash, like I view the Flash as like 60% good and like 40% bad, and this is way better. This is way more good than bad. Like at least like a solid 80 or 90% good, just kind of tainted by that kind of bad ending. But the ending is weighted so heavily. Even if it was like 80% good and like 20% like could have been improved, it was more like 85-15. It's like that last 15%, because it is the ending, is weighted at least another 10, like 15% more. So it was like just the ending alone made this like a solid, like make a solid B to like a somewhere in a C or something like that. Just I wouldn't say it's that bad. It's just like it leaves you feeling that it's like that, because it doesn't leave you kind of like the Barbie movie, where it's like you are just left with some weird feelings about it. It wasn't that great all the way through. Barbie's a bad example because the Barbie movie was so incoherent, and the story was just so weird, and the ending was so weird and poor. But it's just like I said, anything where the ending is just not as good as it otherwise could be, it taints it a little bit. It taints it. It's important to have a good opening and a good close, because those grab you. That's like the palate. It's like the dessert that's left on your tongue. But the ending is always, always, always by far the most important. Because I mean, it's the Dark Knight. Like everybody wants to have the Dark Knight ending. That's such a classic thing. Even though when you watch that, like there's parts of his like Commissioner Gordon's speech are kind of disjointed. There's a couple points in the lines that they don't quite. But just as a whole, the scene is just so cool, and just to see them all. Even though like once again, why wouldn't they just say that somebody else killed these people? But it all just makes for a cool scene. So it's a shame that couldn't have been done better. But overall, it is I would still highly, highly, highly recommend go seeing it, just because it's great to see the dogs on the screen. They all did a really good job with all the dogs. When the dogs are talking, the dogs' mouths move in a realistic CGI way. It's weird to see dogs' mouths move in a way that they're going to talk, but it's like a little like uncanny valley at first. But it's like, what's the alternative to Homeward Bound? It like, hey, talking to each other and their mouths are just fucking closed. Or what are you gonna do, like Mr. Edit, and just give them some peanut butter? So I think they did the best job they could with that. And like I said, just seeing just the practical shots of all these dogs the whole way through was really impressive. I really enjoyed seeing that aspect. Um, yeah, I can't believe we've been talking about the movie Strays for an hour. I hope you enjoyed my thorough breakdown of it. I just feel like I want to be thorough. There's a lot to see. There's and everything has merit, worth talking about it and worth discussing. And, it is an hour and a half plot that I'm breaking down. And I want to make sure those of you that are just kind of listening to this as you're driving along still get a good feel for it and everything like that. So. And I will say too that I think it's important to spend more time than less time on art and stuff, because so I always think of this. So I used to have, and the only reason I bring this up is because we spent an hour talking about a dog, about some stray dogs. It's just ends in a dick joke. Anyway, I always think about this in terms of how long to spend in art. How long should you spend in art? So I had in college, I had a graphic novels, like a study of graphic novels class, like a real college class. We read graphic novels every week, Batman and all sorts of stuff. Really good ones too. Um, that were just different too as well. Anyway, so we read them all each week, and I remember every day in class, like people would be listening, and people like, I read it in 20 minutes. I read that one in 45 minutes. I read it in 30 minutes. Like just saying how quickly they read like the past week's assignment. And like I never really like bothered to tell them that, but I should have. But the point is, like, it always amused me so much because I want to ask them, like, if you ran through the Louvre, if you went to the Louvre, would you just run through it? Like I went through the Louvre in 25 minutes. I made it through the Louvre in 45 minutes. I saw everything in the Louvre. I looked at each painting for 5 seconds each. I mean, these are these are all works of art, and each panel on the page, not even each page, each panel on each page, let alone like each full page spread, is a tiny little individual work of art that somebody planned out, that somebody drew, that somebody inked, that somebody colored, that somebody like laid out, that somebody printed, and it's like, and some of these shots are just amazing. Like I'll never forget. One of the books that we read in there, The Artist by Scott McCloud. I'm sorry, The Sculptor by Scott McCloud. Even the other day, I was in a bookstore and I saw it on the shelf and I picked it up and I looked at this last full page spread of this giant sculpture that the main character makes, and it's such an amazing image. Maybe if people actually look at my videos one day more than like a dozen, I'll put this up here. But it just you can look at it. It's just an image of this giant sculpture over the cityscape of this woman tossing this baby up, and the baby is like kind of up in the air in her arms. And the reason why it's such a beautiful image is that the the focal point builds towards the sky, which is in the top right corner, which is your sky is almost always going to be your focal point. That's also where the image of the woman and the child intersect, and you can see that she's not quite like throwing them, and she's not quite catching them either, which is like something that's hinted on earlier, and that it takes a lot of time and patience to do something like that. So the author's telling us that it takes a lot of time and patience to make anything worthwhile. True, true, true. But then the most important thing though is that well, the most important thing, but one of the most important things about this too is that the baby is looking at the mother and the mother's looking at the baby, and this is happening in the focal point of the skybox. So naturally, your eyes drawn towards this top right corner after seeing all this amazing beauty and all this like close to like foreground and background detail and the cityscape and these people in the slant post. But then eventually, once it takes all that in, the eye goes back between the mother's eyes to the baby's eyes to the mother's eyes to the baby's eyes and back and forth until you eventually get tired and you catch more details, but you don't necessarily get tired of that. There's just so much more beauty to take in, and eventually you go back up between those eyes, and it keeps your eye in motion while still being in the focal point, the overall focal point of the piece. And there's just so much detail steeped in, and it's just a single image that is a culmination of an entire work that really encapsulates everything that work has to say. And once again, I think many of my classmates kind of flew past that. And the other day in the bookstore, I spent like 2 minutes just staring at that image, just because it's so beautiful. I even have that printed out on my wall back home, just because it's a nice image. I framed it because it's such an emotional image to look at. So I hope you don't mind me spending more time than less time talking about these sorts of things, because maybe that'll, judging by this in my last, it seems like that's going to be true to form for my narrative here. And I know probably a lot of the time was spent discussing the plot, breaking that down, but I feel like we stopped off here and there and analyzed a few things on the way. And I feel like I kind of broke it down into more detail than others might. And maybe it's just the cadence of my voice as well. It just has a slower cadence as well. So I hope you all enjoyed that. I guess comment below if you have words to say about that, or what you like, or what you don't like about my videos. And also comment about what your favorite day of the week is. I would be curious to know. Also, if I keep on talking for another minute straight, another minute and 5 seconds, we will be at 60 minutes exactly. So let's see if I can do that. Let's see if there's something for just one more minute that I can talk about. One thing that I talked about here earlier is my proclivity for sitting in the front seat of a theater. And the reason why I enjoy doing this is because people are stupid, and they do things that the way they used to do them because it used to work out well. And you should always view a situation with a fresh pair of eyes. Like, is the way that I'm doing it, is that the best way? Like try and change one thing different each time you do a habit, or during your day, just try and do one thing different. And one thing I noticed a while ago, when all these so the reason why nobody sits in the front rows in a theater is because back in the day when we didn't have reclining chairs, you would have the front rows, you had to crane your neck to look back. You had to crane your neck literally to like look up at the screen. And nobody wants to sit there for 2 hours craning their neck up just to see an off angle screen. Nobody wants to do that. But now we've got all these fancy schmancy recliners that recline and massage your butt and move around and tilt and whirl and all this stuff. And it's great. And it's really great and comfortable, and I love it. Especially on a hot day, you get to cool off and have a nice comfy chair. But think about it. Next time you go into the theaters, think about it. And just do it now, like you're a lazy boy at home. When you recline back at that angle, where's your head? Your head's like tilted back. Like a little bunny, you can't hold his head up. And it's looking up. It's looking up, and like a 30-degree angle up from like straight out from horizontal. And it's like your eyes are just looking up when your head is back in a cradled position. So if you're in a movie theater and you want to look at something ahead of you, your options are then to tilt your head down, which once again you're tilting your head through a majority of a show. If you really want to tilt your head through 2 hours, or you can do what I guess most of us do, you just recline your seat not quite all the way, which is fine. But I mean, if you're telling me that a recliner can recline all the way down, I'm going to recline it all the way down. And I'm going to be annoyed if I can't recline it all the way down for comfort's sake because of my vision. So once again, you're in a situation where you either way is not optimal, unless you recognize that when you do recline all the way down and you are looking up at an angle of 30 degrees, there's about 1, 2, or maybe 3 rows, including maybe that handicapped row, that are optimally angled or optimally positioned to take advantage of that angle. And maybe the screen is a little skewed, like it's a little narrow at the bottom and wider at the top or whatever. I don't know, maybe the vice versa. But I never really seem to mind. I think it's just nice to have something that big, so large. I even sat closer on that. I normally sit in like the handicap row or the second row back, but on Strays I sat in the very front just to try something different. And I even enjoyed that more because it was a small theater, so I was kind of closer than you otherwise might like. But it's like the best things about it is that you've got like that sense of community, but nobody else is around you. Nobody's in your row. You've got some space. You can get out your candy and make some noise. You can vape a little bit and not feel like you're going to bother somebody, like whatever. Which, by the way, if you ever vape in a theater, just Andy Dufresne it out. Just Andy Dufresne, like a little tiny parcel of a puff. Just a tiny parcel of a puff out. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. You can't even see it. Anyway. Andy Dufresne, so sure there's a Shawshank Redemption for all. That's those of you who saw Last Man on Earth. There's a Shawshank Redemption for everyone. You should maybe once again I'll put a little thing here if some people watch it. Anyway, so once again, people are stupid. They don't look at a situation with a fresh pair of eyes because nobody ever sits in the front, even though the front rows are actually optimal for how you should view the screen, how you should enjoy your community there, and how you can have some space and some time and some freedom and really get soaked in with the magic of it all because you're just like right there. It's just like you've got to like turn your head a little bit from left to right sometimes to like track the action, and it's so dang immersive. So my suggestion to you, good sir, next time you go to the theaters, reserve your seat wherever you want, but for just a moment during the previews, go up there and sit down. Sit down in what seat you think might be optimal. I would suggest first or second row, center, or you can wait until the show is about ready to start and sit in one of those handy-dandy, usually empty handicap rows, assuming nobody else needs it, and just sit right there where you've got maybe a little bit more space, and maybe the screen's a little bit more aligned, not so quite distorted, but you're still right there in an optimal angle. But I tell you, there's nothing quite like the front. There's nothing quite like the front on a hot day in a cool bit of air conditioning on a crowded theater when you don't want to be sitting next to somebody else. You don't want to be hearing somebody else's popcorn, but you don't mind a light crackle from kind of back in the peanut gallery. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this review of the movie, the 2023 film Strays. If nothing else, go see it for the dog penises and the cute stray dogs alike. It really makes it worth your time. That's all for today now. Take care.